Welcome back to another Mindful Connections video. Today's module is communication, and specifically we're going to be talking about filters. So it's really about the basic way that communication happens. And it's really important to understand because when we understand how communication happens, we can also begin to understand how miscommunications happen, differences between what we intend and what a person receives. So when you think about communication, right, let's say I'm communicating to you right now. So what I'm trying to do is to get an idea from my head to translate or go from my head into your head without distortions. So the exact image, thought, or idea from my head to go into your head, right? That would be understanding, because what I'm intending to communicate is what's received and understood by you. These messages go through a few different filters. So when I have an idea, if I don't have a clear idea, so if I'm not really sure what I'm trying to communicate and it's all kind of jumbled and chaotic in my head, well then, assuming that I even do a good job at communicating that, it's going to translate into a jumbled and chaotic mess in your head too. So that's number one, right? We have to have a clear idea of what it is that we're trying to communicate, or if we don't, then we can say to the person, I'm feeling really jumbled and chaotic. Here's the jumbled and chaotic mess that I'm feeling. Can you help me make sense of it? Can you sit with me, help me process? Whatever it is that you're asking for them to help you do, maybe just sit in the jumbled and chaotic mess. Hey, I'm having all of these big feelings. Can you sit with me? Right? So that's number one. But we still, even in that paradigm or that example, we still have a clear idea of what we're asking the other person to do, right? So even though the message is pretty jumbled and chaotic, I'm having all these feelings, all of these thoughts, can't make sense of whatever, I still have a really concrete ask for you so that you know what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to receive that message, right? Because otherwise it can get really confusing. So, idea from one person's head into somebody else's head. Step number one is to get clear with yourself about what it is that you're trying to communicate, what it is that you're asking for, what you want the other person to receive. When you have a clear message, you make it that much more likely that they'll be able to receive and respond to it in the way that you're wanting. And that's just effective communication, right? That's what we're going for. So the message first goes through one filter. As I say, okay, here's my message, here's what I'm wanting, and then I translate it into tone, body language, facial expressions, word choice. All of those things are a place where I could potentially introduce distortions. So let's say that I'm angry, or I'm stressed, or I'm feeling insecure, right? Those states of being or those feelings can introduce some distortions to my message, so that instead of being able to say, hey, I'm feeling really insecure, I need you to affirm me, like I need you to validate or to reassure me in some way, right? That the way that I filter, or my habitual pattern of communicating, may instead be something much more self-sabotaging, right? That happens a lot. So step one is your own filtering. A lot of times it's a lot less severe than that, where you just kind of choose words or bumble around, or, it comes off way more aggressive than you would want it to, or you intended it to. So we have like levels of severity here. So message from my head, first filter as I kind of translate it out. And then the second filter comes as you receive it. So the word choice that I'm using, my tone of voice, my body language, my facial expressions, my general state of being will all affect the message that you receive and the way that you're able to receive it. Because your filter may say, oh, she's angry, I'm going to get defensive. And we don't do that consciously. We're not like, oh, she's angry, I'm going to make this more difficult for her by being defensive, right? It's a natural reaction. When you feel attacked, I feel the need to defend myself. That's the way that it goes. People have certain trigger words, or words that activate a more defensive response or a more protected response. People also grew up in certain communicative cultures. So if you're a culture that uses a lot of sarcasm or not, if you're a culture that easily validates feelings or not, if your communication culture or your family, your friend group communicated in a way that was really kind of like harsh and abrasive, or maybe it was like the volume was really loud. That's one really common thing, is that some cultures are just louder than others. And if you come from a quiet culture and a friend, a partner, a family member comes from a louder culture, that can cause a lot of issues in communication purely based on volume with nothing related to intent. And so when we start to become aware of these things, it gives us power in a few different ways. First, we have the power to adjust our own filter, because I can communicate with more intention. I know I can now say to myself, wow, I'm feeling really insecure. I'm having an urge or an impulse to communicate in this way. I can kind of look ahead into the future and see that that's going to be really self-sabotaging and probably not going to get me the result that I want. So let me kind of re-regulate. We'll talk about that in a different video, and communicate in a way that's more effective, right? So we can use our mindfulness or our loving awareness, we can use that to help us communicate in a more effective way. Secondly, once we learn the person that we're communicating with, or the person with whom we're communicating if you're a grammar stickler, we can adjust for their filter too. So I've actually said to people, I know that you're going to hear X, and what I'm saying is Y, because I know that maybe they have a sensitivity where they get defensive easily, and I still need to communicate with them about, that certain issue. Just because you're defensive or have a sensitivity doesn't mean I'm not going to communicate with you. It just means I'm going to communicate in a more sensitive way, because I know you and I want us to be able to communicate in a way that's effective. I'm not just going to throw words and messages at you because you need to hear it, and like, who cares if it's accessible to you or not? That's not the foundation of an effective, healthy relationship that we can maintain over the long term. So sometimes it's a question of, would you rather be right or would you rather be helpful? And in communication, most often, I don't like to say always, but most often, the best choice is to be helpful, to communicate in a way that is effective for you, that meets your needs, and is also effective for your partner or friend or family, that they can receive and is accessible to them. Yeah, it might be true that, they're causing most of their own problems. But if you just look at a person and you're like, you're the reason that you're miserable, most people are not going to have a really effective and helpful response to that. So we can start to communicate in a way that's more skillful when we practice these techniques, when we are in tune with our own filtering, our own state of being, and also when we learn the other person and we start to choose helpfulness over correctness. All right, that's our mini lesson on filtering in this communication module. Until next time, I'm wishing you peace and comfort.